Hi everyone, my name is Adiola Akintoye and welcome to Leadership Conversation with Adiola. Today I'm going to be having an exciting conversation with one of my inspiring leaders. And she used to be my the director, my line manager as well. And so we've come a long way over our career. Norma. Norma is currently the Chief Operating Officer at Find, and our priority right now with Find or at Find is guiding the organization, with all essential business processes. And I'm sure we're going to hear, our recent experience in that. So welcome, Norma. How are you doing today?
Hi, Adiola. It's so good to be here with you today. Thank you for the invitation, by the way.
Oh, thank you for saying yes.
No, my pleasure.
So, today, Norma, I want to explore your leadership journey and get as many nuggets of wisdom as possible, not just for myself, but for all the young emerging leaders and mature leaders as well, because we never stop learning. So tell us about your leadership journey. How did it start?
Of course. Leadership is, um, I think that if you ask me to summarize what it means for me, it's an opportunity. It's an enormous opportunity. Um, but in order to be ready to maximize what that opportunity can be, it's a long journey. So you have to. I would like to start by saying that my first sort of encounter to my own leadership is I will never forget it. I was maybe 25 years old, and I was, working with a very, very small team, not managing them. It was just my colleagues, and I was with one of them in particular, who was the one that I had the best relationship with, and we spent the most time with. And some senior person in the bank where I was working in, for some reason, walked in, and he asked this guy about whether he considered me a leader. And this guy said, no, she's not a leader.
Oh, wow.
And for me, it was, not only embarrassing, of course, but it was shocking in that at that point in my life, I thought, I had uh, I had done well, even though I was still very young. I had done a lot of new stuff in the bank and sort of spearheading the efforts. So for me, it was shocking that he just so blatantly said that I was not a leader, not even a qualification, that he just didn't consider that I had the skills of a leader. So for me, that was sort of the first realization and the first time that that term came into my life. And as you can imagine, it sort of painted my journey for quite a few number of years. Um, and it sort of defined what I believed about myself, I do have to say. And I think that the next, um, mm, from then onwards, I just focused on learning how to manage people. Right? For me, the term leadership was sort of completely to the side. Um, it was challenging. I think that there's nothing more challenging in any job whatsoever than managing people, because we are fascinating, but we are very complex. And I had a very difficult time with it. I used to be, I'm in finance, that's how you and I met. So I was very much into my numbers and my computer and my spreadsheets. And the least that I had to do with people, the happier I was. So learning how to not only really interact, but be responsible for others was quite challenging. And, maybe 20 years later, I was leaving one of the organizations that I worked in for maybe 8 years. And in my farewell, we used to do this thing, whenever everybody left, that everybody stood in a circle to say their goodbyes, and some people said some words, and so on and so forth. And it was in that meeting, first of all, I was super surprised that so many people showed up, like tons of them. And I was even more surprised when this woman that I didn't really particularly interact with said this long speech about how much I had influenced her and how much she looked up to me, and how when I was, I was saying whatever in a meeting, she understood. And in that moment, it became as a huge realization the impact that I could have in people, and how everything that you do, everything that you say, really influences people around you.
Mm.
Um, so I think that for me, that was a turning point from that moment when somebody said, no, she's not a leader, she can't be, to understanding that I had that influence on others around me.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And, for me as well, leadership is part of leadership is that influence by others, and how one then becomes an effective leader is how one influences. So it must have been so motivating for you hearing that feedback,
Yeah,
unsolicited feedback, which is
yeah.
great. So since the time you had that consciousness about, there's a difference between managing people and leading people, I guess, can you share one person that has truly inspired you most? If you were to look back from now, from that time to now, who would you say that was?
I think it is impossible to just mention one name. I mean,
Yeah.
I can give you the big names of people that everybody knows that are inspiring, and certainly, for example, Michelle and Barack Obama and Jacinda Ardern and Malala, for me, are great figures that have shown tremendous leadership in the world. But I do think that in the leadership journey, you have many different phases, right? And you give many steps, and it is a very long road. And I do think that in all of that long journey, you need different things at different moments in time. And therefore, the people that you look up to and that influence who you become change
Oh,
throughout the journey. So, I mean, in my case, it certainly started with my mom and dad, right? I mean, my dad being a person that was, very demanding and very even harsh, but at the same time that was on, fair to a fault, and that was really concerned about those around them. Or my mom that could get anything done. Um, so it starts when you're that young, I think. But I mean, other than those very public figures, for me, it's been the bosses that I have worked with, and that have definitely been very different throughout my career, but all of whom have really had an influence. From those who were literal geniuses with a tremendously high degree of education that motivated me to decide that I had to keep studying and that I have to do my master's degree and so on and so forth, to the many bosses that I've been very lucky to have that basically trusted me blindly and gave me the space to do a whole bunch of things that I didn't know how to do and that I was not even sure I was going to be able to do. But their trust basically being their message to me that they knew that I could do it. To, I mean, in particular, one boss that was the worst boss that anyone can think of, but she took the time to give me feedback all of the time, and I learned a ton from it. And she also, gave a statement that I was never going to be able to achieve X, Y, and Z, and that was my motivation to prove her wrong and to get to places where I would have never imagined I would get. So yeah, I think it has changed through time, but without a doubt, it's the way that people have role modeled for me who they are and their values, and being consistent between what they say and what they do. Um, yeah. So yeah, I think I have many. I have had many. Can give you tons of examples, but and just to finish that off, I think that my biggest inspiration, however, Adiola, is the people that I work for, my
mm,
teams.
mm,
Having teams that really have faith in you, that are really to go out on a limb for you, that are committed and devote all of their efforts to really fulfill what you're asking of them. Having also their forgiveness, because I've made tons of mistakes along the way, and then sort of bearing with those mistakes. You were kind of first row to that, and just their enthusiasm to just show up, be there, and sort of walk the walk with the road with me.
Mm. Yeah, powerful. I guess, if when you have people that totally, you talk about, trusting you, forgiving you, people that work with you, they must have experienced something from you to be able to give you that back. From what you were also saying, people that line manage you as well were part of your inspiration, positive as well as negative as
Negative,
well.
exactly. What you want to be, but certainly what you do not want to be. Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So, what has been the most challenging or difficult aspect of your leadership?
Yeah, I mean, as I have shared, it's a long journey. Certainly have had a ton of challenges, but I think I can think primarily of two. The first one is what I see as a tension and even clash between self confidence and self importance. And what do I mean uh, by this? I mean, to be a leader, you obviously have to believe in yourself, right? You have to trust your gut feeling. You have to have confidence in what you're doing, because it's something that you have to transmit, right? Because otherwise, why would people follow you? But at the same time, there's a lot of things that as leader, you're not the owner of the truth. You are not perfect. You're not supposed to do everything. So this balance between confidence but being humble, of being comfortable in your own imperfection, but demanding the best of others, um, is quite complicated to that reach that space. And certainly letting go of my control freakness has been another one that yeah, it's hard, right? So for me, that is certainly one. And the other one, I guess, is, and this depends very much on the individual, right? For me, as I mentioned, I really like having control over things. So learning to step back, to give that space to others, to have them feel safe if they make a mistake, and sort of both having them understand and me understand that that is part of the process. I think it is quite challenging, but without creating that space for your team to be able to learn and to develop, they will not be able to go anywhere, right? And I think that if we go back to what is for me the meaning of leadership, um, I mean, obviously it's making a difference. It's adding value. It's supporting and accompanying others. It's about learning, but it's above and beyond. It's above all serving the organization, serving your staff members, serving your stakeholders. So you have to learn to step back so that you can just provide and support and accompany them in what they have to achieve.
Mm. Yeah, powerful. I can definitely hear from what you've just said, a very high level of self-awareness and understanding your own, self-understanding being also part of the most challenging part of your leadership, knowing who you are and, helping others as well, along as we've said. And, it's been said that leadership can be lonely at the top. So as we're serving, like you said, serving people, it's very challenging because people are very unique.
Yeah.
And while, trying to, you know, address one's own weakness, which we all have, in order to be able to serve others can be very frustrating sometimes. And as leaders, you don't really have the luxury of saying everything all the time. So who do you go to, in your own journey when you feel like screaming and, just letting out because, sometimes, you want to scream, but you have to smile in some situation. So who do you go to when you want to let off steam as a leader, apart from your husband and your family?
For them, yeah. um, you're absolutely right. It is very lonely. It is very lonely because you're carrying a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. You have to be sort of the strong pillar for others. But I want to caveat that uh, as well. I do think that one of the biggest shifts in my own mindset as I was progressing in that journey of leadership was understanding, you grow up and you get sort of injected with this stereotype of what a leader needs to be, and somebody strong and super smart that has all the answers and blah, 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 blah. For me, one of my biggest milestones in my journey was to understand that I didn't have to be perfect to be a leader. I didn't have to have all the answers. I didn't have to know the future. I did not have to be perfect. And that encompasses as well that as a human, we are all vulnerable and we all have our weak moments. And it is okay. It is okay. And I do think that not being afraid to share with staff that, yes, you are human. And right now, in this instant, you are feeling that vulnerability makes you stronger because it really allows you to be able to connect. But notwithstanding that, because of course there's a limit to that, for me, coaching has been an invaluable tool. Having somebody that is not really within your environment that can provide you a really an objective view on a situation and on yourself, and that continuously asks you questions so that they help you do that self reflection. They don't have the answers either, but they take you to really getting out of yourself. So for me, that has been a wonderful tool. I am also fortunate to have, sort of a handful of very strong women leaders around me, either from my previous jobs or, through business school, whatever, that I not super often, but I do reach out to, particularly when I'm feeling down or when I have a problem that I really am having a little bit of an issue in resolving. So not being scared to reach out. And I mentioned that because I mean, of this handful of people, three of them are really very good friends of mine, but two are people who were, super senior people at the moment in life that I met them, and where at a point in life I was like, I know that she could help me, or I know that he could help me. And do I call the? I just went ahead, sort of putting myself out there because these people could have very well said, sorry, I'm really too busy and don't have time for your existential crisis. But on the contrary, they were super welcoming and super open and super happy to help me and to really discuss these issues. So yeah, not being afraid to reach out to those that you admire, that you can learn from. I think that is really very, very important.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, wow. I'm going to do something after this conversation and reach out to some people as well. So
Yeah,
not
yeah,
being afraid. And one thing you said that, we're not perfect, it's okay to be vulnerable as a leader, you know,
mhm,
um, not just stick to stereotypes. Say this is the what a leader should be to do, and as such, I have to fit myself
yeah,
into that
absolutely.
space. Yeah. And sharing with people when needed as well, because they just want to see that vulnerability, and that helps and move things forward. And you mentioned coaching as well. Great tips.
Yeah.
So as a business executive, with a lot of experience on business side of the organization, What would you say has been a common thread throughout your career, if you were to look back,
Yeah.
that sort of shaped where you are now?
Yeah, it's quite funny because there's a very clear one, and it's not something that I looked for. It just has happened, and it has sort of repeated itself in every single job that I have had, which is I've always found myself in situations where I had to either start something new, build up a business, build up a new product, build up something, or where I had to really fix something and turn around something. So for me, that's also sort of this link back to creating something new.
Mm,
And again, it's been quite peculiar because I haven't particularly looked for it, and it's been situations where I've over and over again gone into a space where people are not particularly happy about change, um, where they're not happy dealing with change, and they're this fear of things evolving. It just they don't know how to manage, and that fear really gets in the way. It's been also situations where things are not quite working, or people don't know how to make them work, but not because they don't want to, it's just because they don't know how to, um, or if they know because the context doesn't allow them to, which is also quite common. And they just need somebody to help them figure out what the way forward can be. So for me, that it's again, it's just funny because it's happened over and over and over again.
yeah, there's something about nature in that space. So I know from my working with you, and also from following you as well in terms of your career, that there's this repeated instances from also what you're saying in leading design or implementation of complex new initiative and change processes. I always think, in change process, there is when you lead a change process, there's when you lead a complex change process, there's when you lead a complex change process in a complex organization, like three times the problem and the challenges. What would you say if you look at, because what I didn't mention at the start, that you were actually an interim CEO, and before this current organization, and you led a complex organization, and you led many, complex change processes. It wasn't just one change processes, within a complex organization that had many political layers in terms of its governance and structure. Looking back, what did you learn from that processes that you would be able to share as keys to success in leading complex change processes, especially in a complex organizational situation?
Yeah, as I mentioned, fear is always a component when you're talking about change, right? So I think that being able to transmit to people that, yeah, change is scary, but that is exciting and it's an opportunity. And, being able to transmit to people, yeah, like this is what it could be. I mean, just don't look back and, yeah, what you're going to lose and whatever. But this is the whole of what we can achieve if we dare give those steps to get there. I think that helping people not to get stuck in the past and really being able to look towards something exciting is quite important. I think that also, and this goes all the way back to this um, tension around self confidence and acknowledging that you're not the owner of the truth, and a full acknowledgement that there is not a single version of the truth. You might have 20 people, all of them who have individual needs, sometimes in direct contradiction with each other, and with some exceptions, because there are, all of those needs are valid. All of those needs are valid. And until you acknowledge that that is the case, that there is truth in every version of what's happening, is it possible to be able to start building a common space? I mean, where do those needs interact with each other so that you can find something that really addresses what your different stakeholders need, at least to some degree? It won't, and that's also very important to acknowledge at the beginning, being clear. I am, there is no way to make everybody 100% happy. What we want here is a situation where the priority needs of everybody are addressed.
Mm.
So for me, that was super important. And then finally, also being able to transmit and have people fully embrace that we're, as individuals, there's just so much that we can achieve, and that it is together that really big things can happen. I think that is a rule of life. Yes, we're super important as individuals, but there's just so much more that we can be when we are together, and when we work together, and when we build together, and when we think together. For me, that has been, yeah, super important. And yeah, I mean, also in the process to just create that safety for people to test and explore and take risks. I think that, it's quite a cliche that if you don't take risks, then there's nothing to gain. But it is true. It is definitely true. But sometimes the environment doesn't allow for that risk. And being able to give the opportunity to people to take risks, but also to, in the measure that it might be possible, really being aware that sometimes many of the risks that are taken are not something that will determine our destiny from now until the day that we die. It's because it's not like that, right? I mean, if you're smart, if you anticipate enough, most decisions can be readjusted, can be refined, can be built upon. I mean, there are some that's not the case. But yeah, in quite a large number of situations, s- decisions is just a series of decisions. It's not that there is the decision.
Thank you. I'm going to try and list it for my own understanding, and also for the benefit of anyone else who really wants to learn about, complex change. You spoke about creating the vision, the why, we need to do this, so that, getting people on board and excited about the need for change. You spoke about eliminating fear, which I guess the vision, could also help to eliminate fear. You spoke about acknowledging people's own truth, and that is so true. And we can all see the situation from so many different perspectives because of diversity, and affirming their truth as well, and trying to build a common ground, coming to a common space, and taking risk as well, which, this for me is about adapting, isn't it? Yeah, we know what we know right now, so we can just adapt as we go along. So I see a lot of very strong people focused in any complex change process. Did I summarize nicely?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely right.
Okay, thank you so much for that. The leadership, we always aim to have some, very incremental successes, because we fail and we get up, and we continue. Can you share a mistake you have made? And you yourself mentioned earlier that, you make mistakes. So I'm building up on that. A mistake that you've made that I think significantly contributed to maybe shaping or reshaping your leadership approach.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I've made tons and tons and tons of mistakes, but I think, I mean, talking about one that really shifted who I was and my, my values and my objectives was, after this particular role where I literally took myself to the verge of burnout.
Mm.
The reason why it's for me directly related to the leadership space is because for me, having reached that point was the result of exemplifying exemplifying the definition of arrogance. I wanted to do everything right, to do everything myself, to I mean, for me, it was a result of my own arrogance. And again, in terms of leadership, um, why do I think that it was such a big mistake? Because I wanted to do everything, which meant I really limited what my team could do. And in not letting them do, I also was transmitting to them a message that I didn't trust them. And in transmitting that message, I was really curtailing the way that they could grow and develop.
Mm.
I was also not role modeling the things that needed to be role modeling. I was not role modeling self care. I was not being a good role model in terms of what teamwork is. So, yeah, definitely not transmitting the right things. I certainly abandoned my family. Also, not a good example. So for me, that was quite fundamental in finding myself in a space where not only I was ill physically and ill emotionally and psychologically, but that I really saw a contradiction that I was in this shape because I just wanted to lead the organization to a different place because I wanted to do a good job and having missed the mark so radically, right? So for me, after that experience, it certainly was a um, cold shower in humbleness, in acknowledging that there's just no way, right? I mean, it's the people around me that make things happen, and it's me relying on them, and it's again giving them the space and simply learning how to leverage my strengths with the strengths of those around me. That is important. So yeah, it was quite an important lesson.
Wow, gosh. Being a perfectionist, one thing everything to be perfect, and one can consciously or and unconsciously, so yeah, wanting to be a perfectionist, unfortunately, from what you were saying, transmits, that you don't trust the team and you are not role modeling, and you are also sort of damaging yourself as well in terms of your own well-being. And I can get this understanding now your earlier statement around being vulnerable, and and that's okay. And I'm just thinking in my head, I hope Norma is going to write a book, or now she got from the level of being a perfectionist to actually being, an empowering person that has a
Mm,
lot, because I'm sure it's not
it's not
easy.
easy.
It
It is
wasn't a
not
one
easy.
day, 2 day, it was a process. And
Yeah.
so I think, you probably have a lot to share with people, leaders who burn themselves out, or perfectionists. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leaders.
It's a daily struggle. I mean, even now, it is a daily struggle.
Yeah, yeah. I would love to, maybe I'll invite you to come and do a workshop on that.
Uh, Happy to.
Great. So we're coming to an end, but I don't want it to end. What would be your top three advice to emerging leaders who desires to be effective in leadership? Something from you've given us a lot,
Yeah.
in the conversation, maybe additional three things that people should hold on to be
Yeah.
effective as leaders.
Yeah. I do want to repeat two that we've already said, and I'll add a couple more. But certainly, leadership training and coaching invaluable. It's a skill that needs to be learned. There's very few people that really just are natural leaders. So training and coaching, and you mentioned it. I do think that self-awareness is key. There is no way that you can be a good leader without really knowing yourself, but more importantly, to being happy with who you are and understanding that a good leader is usually followed not because of what they do or what they know, they're followed because of the person that they are. So being comfortable with doing you, I think is important. But Certainly, a key, another one that we really have not talked about is feedback. Constantly looking for feedback. This boss that I talked about that was not very good, as I said, she did give me feedback and she did teach me a few really invaluable things. And one of them is that she used to say that feedback is the food of champions. And there's nothing truer than that. Because you do things without realizing that you're doing them. So, really getting that reflected back to you. And as I said, it's super important to be comfortable being you, but finding ways to be you, but be better. I think that that is also quite important. And just to give you an example, I am very blunt and very straightforward, as you know, but I used to be quite brutal. And in my journey, I have learned to say the same thing, but being kinder. So things don't, sometimes we believe that things are mutually exclusive. And yeah, and that is not necessarily true. And finally, never forgetting that leadership, it's not about you. It's always about how to best serve others.
Thank you so much. Yeah. What a great way to end this conversation. Leadership is not about you, it's about serving others. I can also see another discussion coming up on feedback. There's one thing to say, oh, I'm always giving you feedback. So, and, there's a whole thing about how to give feedback the right way. And one of my, a leader that inspired me, Jasmine Whitbread, she one thing that I'll never forget always is how she gave feedback. I always share that she gave a negative feedback in a positive way.
That's great.
And
that's great.
Skill, that
That's
you
great.
give somebody, negative feedback and they'll feel good.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's quite a challenge, in that area. But thank you so much, Norma.
No, my pleasure.
I'm going to listen back to this conversation and pull out a lot of the nuggets that you've shared today. And I wish you all the very best in your new role.
Thank you so much.
I know that your team and the whole organization, they're going to get the Norma excellent leader effect.
So thank you so much.
Best. Thank you for joining me. And for our viewers, or if you are listening on the podcast version, we'll be sharing Norma's LinkedIn details so that if you want to connect with her, please do. And yeah, all the best till next time on a conversation with Adiola. Have a great leadership.
Thank you so much, Adiola. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.